Hey, it's Terry back with another video. So a few days ago, I was on a website. In fact, it was this website right here. And I just happened to be looking at this site, interested in this course that this person is teaching. And as I was going through the website here, I was curious to find out how long is this person's course. So this person is offering a course teaching teaching Affinity Designer, which is a vector graphics art application. So anyway, I'm looking at this website and I was just curious, like, okay, he's charging however much he's charging for it. How long is this course? And I see here that he has the individual lessons of the course, but I didn't see anywhere on the page where he gives the total amount of time. And then a light bulb went off on top of my head, as does happen often from time to time. And I thought, you know what? I can turn this into a neat little exercise to play with JShell and a little bit of Java code. And basically what I wanted to do was to find out, what is the total runtime of this course, right? Even though he doesn't explicitly tell it to me. So let me tell you a few things about people that I think are naturally born programmers, which I guess I would be one of them. We suffer from a special breed of laziness, and it's actually a combination of laziness and whatever the opposite of laziness would be, diligence, I guess. So we tend to be very lazy when it comes to doing manual labor, okay? But if we can use our brains to do work, there's almost no limit to how much effort and time we will spend in that direction. And so with an issue like this, where you just want to know how long is this total course, you could just eyeball the minutes here and kind of add them up either in your head or wherever, right? That's one thing you could possibly do. But that makes me slightly vomit in my mouth a little bit to consider doing that. And I don't know how many lines there are here, but more than I'd want to do. So as a lazy programmer, rather than spend whatever it would be, maybe 5 minutes to kind of eyeball these numbers and come up with a rough sum total of the amount of time here, or maybe even 10 minutes, I don't know what it would be. I'd rather spend 2 hours writing code to automate that process. That's just how my brain works. I don't like doing manual labor. I hate it. I really, really hate it, especially if I know in the back of my head, there's probably an automated way to do this, right? So in today's video, we're going to play around with automating how to get the sum total of time here using JShell. And this will give us an opportunity to play with JShell a little bit more and maybe even kind of get a comparison of whether or not JShell really would be the right tool to use for this, okay? And quick check here. You probably could do what we're about to do even with Excel or Apple numbers. I haven't done it, but you probably could do it too. But where's the fun in that? I'm a programmer, right? So let's see if we can do this with JShell. All right, so there's a couple things that make this seem like it should be doable. And the first bit is the fact that the data that we're interested in, which is really just this column here, right, with all these times in parentheses, it's all in a table. And so there's a good likelihood that we can literally just kind of copy everything right out of the web page, and we don't have to do any fancy web scraping or whatever, some kind of fancy parsing. I don't think that's necessary at all. All right, so what I'm going to do here is, like, I just started kind of copying this, and I'm going to come down here to the end. I'm going to hold down on Shift and then click at the end of here, and that selects everything in what I guess is an HTML table, or it might be a few different HTML tables. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But that let me copy all of this data in the middle of the page here. Okay, so actually I didn't do a copy yet. So Command C. There we go. Okay, so now I've copied that into my clipboard. So now I'm going to jump over to a terminal prompt like so, and then let's just start up JShell. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is to create a variable probably a multi-line string variable, in fact, to just hold on to what I just copied into the clipboard, okay? And so let's see, I'm gonna make a var variable. And for those of you who are not aware, so Java does support this kind of a shortcut way of creating a variable where you don't have to first define the actual data type. You can just say it's going to be var because it can be inferred from the rest of the line here. So you'll see what I mean in just a minute. So let's call this variable lessons. And I'm going to make a multi-line string. So these are new as of Java. Boy, I don't remember what version of Java they were introduced into, but they support multi-line strings now. So to do a multi-line string, you just do 3 quotation marks and then a new line. And then I can go ahead and just paste what I just copied, okay? So look how that pastes pretty cleanly. And then I can close this off with 3 more quotes like so, okay? And maybe I should move my keyboard shortcut thingy here to the top. So let me do that real quick. Okay, there we go. So I moved that up to the top, and so let's hit return, and cool. So we've got that variable defined. Now, if I reference that variable, and I just did like typed it in and hit a tab there, okay, cool. So that just lets me see that, yes, indeed, I have captured all of that information, okay? So probably what we want to do at this point is to kind of think through, at least at a high level, the basic steps that we can take in Java to be able to parse all of this out. So let's jump back over here to the browser window and just look at the data that we've got. So what we want to do is we want to parse out just these times, right? And then we just want to add them up as time, all right? So the question is, how could we do that? And one approach that we could use here is the fact that Java does now also contain a much improved date and time API. And I happen to know one of the classes in the new datetime API. I'm sorry, I keep calling it new. It's been around for years, but I think it's still kind of newish to a lot of Java developers. Anyway, one of the things that exists in the revised Java datetime API is a class that represents a duration of time, okay? So what I'm thinking is we could take these minutes and seconds here and plug them into instances of the duration time, because once you've got that data in the form of durations, you can then add up a bunch of durations. So the duration class actually has a bunch of cool methods on it for adding and subtracting time and things like that. And then you can actually just get the total elapsed time or the total time or something like that. In fact, let's take a quick peek at what I'm even talking about. All right, so if we come over here and I try to reference duration and I'm hitting tab, I'm not getting anything. And the reason for that is because the JShell does not by default know what package the duration class is in. And this is one of the things that I'm not too crazy about or not too fond about with the JShell, is the fact that unlike when I'm using a modern real Java IDE, I could start typing DURA and then ask for auto completion, and IntelliJ would know that I was probably referring to the duration class, and it would then offer to import the correct package of that class for me. But in the JShell, unfortunately, for this particular class, which isn't already automatically imported, I kind of have to know what package this class is part of. Now, in this case, it's actually not too difficult to know because we're talking about dates and times, and so I happen to know that there's a java.time, all right? And then if I do a tab again, I can look through these classes here and bam, there you go. There's duration right there. So I'm going to do a Control A to move to the front of this line, and then I'm going to simply type import and then a Control E to get back to the end. And I will just be lazy and just import everything. It doesn't matter. This is a one-off kind of a thing, okay? All right, so there's that. So now I should be able to refer to duration, and there we go. So I typed DUR and hit tab. And what I want to see here is what are the methods on this class. I could probably even hit tab a few times just to see the overall documentation for it, okay? So yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff that I'm not going to read through, okay? And then if I do a dot, let's see, Now, there's a parse method, and usually these kinds of utility type classes and stuff that have a parse method, that parse method is almost always very, very useful for what we want to do, because probably what you want to do is you want to go from some kind of text representation of the concept, so a text representation of a duration, to an actual instance of a duration. So let's take a look at this parse method here and see if that might let us do what we want. And it looks like it probably does, because it takes as an input a character sequence, which is in our case a string. Strings are a subclass of character sequence, or character sequence is an interface. I can't remember which one. It doesn't really matter. But basically it means text, okay? So let's see, it takes as an input some kind of text, and then it returns as output an instance of a duration. So if I hit tab again, I can get more detail about what format does that text need to be in, because obviously it's not going to just take it in any old format. It has to be in a particular format, okay? And it looks down here like we've got some examples right here. So PT20.345s, and I guess the S means seconds. So if I hit tab again, I can see more examples here. So here we go, yeah. So PT, a number, and then an M to parse minutes, H to parse hours, and then it looks like you can combine these things in any way that you want, right? So that looks like that's going to be the way to go, is we can just take those values from the web page and reformat them into this format, PT, and then the minutes followed by an M, and then the seconds followed by an S, like they have up here, and then feed that string into the parse method of duration, and then that will return a duration. So let's jump back over here. Okay. So we want to parse out the minutes and the seconds of each of these. So now there's a question of, okay, how can we do that? And I think possibly the easiest way that I can think to do that would actually be to use a regular expression. So if we used regex, we could easily tell it to just find all instances on this page that match this pattern. And we could either include the parentheses, though I don't even think we need to include the parentheses, because I don't see anything else that would be confused. If we just made a regex that said, look for 1 or 2 digits followed by a colon, followed by 2 digits. It looks like the seconds are always going to be 2 digits, but the minutes, yeah, there's a 2-digit minute. So yeah, 1 or 2 digits for the minutes, okay? So yeah, we can just use regex to find all of those patterns. And then we could use capture groups to capture which part is the minute and which part is the seconds, right? Based on the presence of that colon there. And then once we've got that, we could reformat that into this format here of a PT, minutes followed by M, and then seconds followed by S, right? So we could reformat all of that, and we could do that like with a string.format, for example. And then once we've got that, we could pass that into the duration.parse, which will return a duration. And then we could simply add up all of the durations themselves, okay? So let's see how we could actually do this. So, okay, let me do a Control C. So this is the kind of, the pre-planning, if you will, okay? Now, if I were in a real IDE, I probably wouldn't even do this much pre-planning. But the one problem that you're going to see here with using the JShell to do this is that it's a little awkward to insert new ideas of new lines for new ideas as you're evolving the code, okay? And one other thing is that the JShell doesn't make it very easy by default to write a multi-line chain of code, okay? So let me show you what I mean here. So let's go ahead and define a regular expression to parse this format, okay? So let's see here, we'll use a pattern, because that's where the regular expressions, that's how you start off with creating a regex typically. Pattern.compile, and I'm gonna just kind of start this off this way. So let's see, we've got a digit, and we want 1 or 2 digits, right? Followed by a colon, followed by 2 digits, just like so. However, we want to capture these 2 bits, the minutes and the seconds, right? And so I'm gonna back up a bit and let's see, right here, and I'm going to put all of that inside of parentheses. And I was gonna make a named capture group, but in this case, I don't think I want to bother with that. I want to keep this a little bit more lightweight, I guess. So let me go right over here and close that off, okay? And then I will do the same thing again, capture another, make another capture group here. Whoops, I went too far. There we go. Okay, so now I'm capturing the minutes and the seconds, and that they are going to be inside of capture groups 1 and 2 respectively. Capture group 0 would be the entire regex, okay, or the entire match rather. All right, so I'm defining that, and now I want to capture this compile, this regular expression so that I can refer to it later. So I'm going to do a Control A to move to the beginning of this line, and I will do a var, and I will just call this variable pat. Okay, so I'm going to, capture this pattern like so. All right, so there's my regular expression. Okay, now I've got this lessons variable here, right? And this is inside of a string, a multi-line string, but it's still a string. And what I'm really thinking is that I could probably use the Java Streams API, which is getting us into functional programming, to kind of set up basically a pipeline of steps, okay? So step 1, go through each line here. Step 2, parse out just the time portion of each line. However, like here's a line right here that doesn't have a time portion. So that means we're going to want to filter out lines for which the regular expression does not match. And we can do all of those steps with the Streams API, right? So let me show you a little sneak preview of kind of what I'm getting at, but I'm going to warn you that this first approach that I'm going to show you may or may not be ideal, okay? So I can start off with the lessons variable here, and then to get a stream of the individual lines that are in this lesson, I can use the lines method here, okay? So that will return a stream, which is a functional notion, okay? So this is from functional programming. That will return a stream of strings, okay? So in other words, it's basically a functional way of essentially iterating over each individual line, okay, within this table or these tables, okay? And in fact, let me show you what that could even look like. So if I do a for each, this is just temporary code that I'm showing you right here. Let's see, and I could do a system out print line like this. Now I do the system.out : print line so that I don't have to explicitly write out, well here, I'll just show you, so that I can avoid having to do a full, a more formal Lambda expression. Whoops, went too far, didn't I? So the alternative way that I could have done this is something like this, with a variable name there, and then instead of doing that, I could do a system.out.print line. And then I could reference that S and then close this off like this. And here, let's go ahead and just run that. Okay, so there you go. You see each individual line. Or, and get rid of all of that. And come over here and do 2 colons. So now I'm referencing a method. This is called a method reference, okay? And do this. And so this will be the equivalent of what I just showed a moment ago, okay? So the Streams API will know that the objects that are being passed into this for each method here from the stream are strings, and it will see that this print line method can only take 1 argument of type string, and so it will take the strings that are coming out of the stream from this lines method and then just pass them right into this print line method, okay? So it's just a shorthand, basically, right? And so if I run that, I get the same exact output, okay? So that just shows kind of what that's doing, okay? So let's see, and let's find one of the lines where, yeah, so here's a line that doesn't have the time bit right here, this pixel persona tools, right? Nothing there, okay? So that just shows that we will want to skip some of these lines when we're converting them into durations, and we can do that quite easily. So the next thing we'd want to do then is that, I guess for each line, we will want to create a matcher object, okay? Getting back to the regex stuff, okay? So you've got patterns and matchers, okay? So since we want to convert these lines of text into matchers, we're doing a conversion, and in the Streams API, anytime you're converting from one type to another type, you're doing a map, okay? So we will use the map function now. And so we're going to take as an input these lines, individual lines that are strings, and convert them into a matcher. So to get a matcher, typically you would call pattern.match. So in fact, we could do something like this, pattern.matcher, and then we would pass in the text. I don't know why I called that M. I was thinking of matcher, but it's actually not an M. It should be more like an S. Not that it matters, but anyway, so that's how you could do that. However, just as I showed you with the for each, we don't have to write this out so explicitly, right? We could actually just do a pattern : matcher like so, and that would be equivalent, and it's shorter. So now let me show you one issue with the approach that I'm taking right now. And the issue is that I'm going to do a lot of different processing, right? And I could write it all out this way, but it's going to be kind of, whoops, I don't know what I'm doing there, but it's going to be kind of messy. These are not obviously real, this is not real Java code. I'm just kind of showing you some pseudo whatever ideas. What's going to happen though is this is going to get kind of messy and difficult to parse with our eyes if I make a one-liner that just keeps going and going and going. What I would much prefer to do is to break up each of the steps in this pipeline, in this streams pipeline, onto their own lines. However, if I were to hit enter to go to a new line, because the JShell is a REPL, its default behavior is to execute as soon as you hit enter, right? So in other words, I don't want it to execute. I want to just move this dot map to another line, and then the next dot whatever, I want that to be on its own line. And then only when I'm done with everything, then it should go execute. But I can't do that. See, it just tried to execute that right now. I can't do it this way at least, okay? So if I want to get around that, one thing that I can do is to actually put everything inside of curly braces. In fact, there's a couple things I could do. I could either just define an actual method, or I can just put it all inside of curly braces. So let's see what this looks like if I put everything inside of curly braces, okay? So I'm going to do curly brace here. Right? And so now that just indented. And so now if I come over here and hit enter, look at that. Now I can start breaking things up line by line, and it's not executing because it knows I haven't finished telling it the end of this entire code block, okay? With the closing curly brace, okay? So that's a interesting little trick. Now, it's not totally ideal, but again, if you just want to do a quick and dirty kind of one-off in the JShell, then maybe this is a way that you could do this and still have your code look relatively clean and orderly, okay? All right, so let's see. So at this point, we are converting the strings into matchers, okay? And so now the next thing I want to do, though, is I want to call each of these matchers to ask it, hey, does your current line that you're matching for actually match this pattern? Like, can you find this pattern? Because if you don't find this pattern, then we should just throw out lines like this one here, right? This line doesn't have the pattern of the time, so we should just ignore that. Throw it out. Throw it out of our stream or out of our pipeline, right? So to throw out or exclude entries in our pipeline, we can use the streams API.filter method, okay? So we can do a filter like so. All right, and so what's coming as input into this filter from the stream is now going to be a matcher. And we can call the matcher.find method, okay? So we're asking the find method of the matcher class, hey, do you find any reference to our pattern, okay? And if the response to that is true, then that current matcher object will continue on with the pipeline. And if the response is false, then it'll just get thrown out, okay? So again, though, we can use the method reference syntax here. So I can call matcher : find, like so. Now, some of you are going to be wondering, why did I use a capital M here? And the reason I did that is because I don't actually have a variable that I can reference for the matcher, okay? So this map call here converted a string into a matcher, okay? But I don't have any name for this matcher. I don't want to explicitly write out something like M, this, and then, you know, M dot find. I could do that, right? I just did that, in fact, but I don't know, maybe that's a little more noisy, right? So in this approach, I am actually using a variable. I named the matcher that's being passed into this filter, and I named it M. I could have named it anything, by the way. But if I want to avoid having to type all of that out, then I can simply refer to the class itself and then the find method, okay? And so the Streams API is smart enough to understand that, hey, if the objects that got passed into this filter method are of type matcher, then go find a method on them called find, and then just call it, okay? And indeed, that is what's happening. All right, so there's that. So what will come out of that filter method now are just the matchers for the lines that actually have time in them, okay? And then the lines that don't have any time in them have now just been thrown out, okay? So we're just ignoring those. All right, so now we've got just these lines. So I think the next thing I want to do now is just to isolate out these time portions themselves and convert them into that other format that we talked about for the duration, but as a string, okay? So in other words, let's convert these matchers into strings that match the pattern. Where's that pattern at? That match this pattern here, PT, and then a number in minutes, and then a number in seconds, okay? So let's get that as the next output, okay, as strings, okay? So that's going to be converting from matchers to strings of a particular format. So then, since we're doing a conversion, we will do another map, okay? Now for this, I won't be able to use the method reference approach because I'm gonna have to refer to a variable, okay? So I've got matcher instances coming in here, so I'm going to use the M variable. That's just what I'm gonna name it. And again, I could name it whatever I want to, and it could have multiple letters in the name. It doesn't have to be a one-letter variable. I just don't want to be typing very much, okay? So, and then I'm going to call string.format, and let me just set all of this up so that I don't forget to close off any of these parentheses, and we'll even do the quotes there, okay? And so we're going to start with a PT, and then %s, and then minutes, and then %s, and then capital S for the seconds, right? And then comma, and then m.group1, comma, m.group, and let me just make sure I don't forget the closing quotes correctly there, 2, like so, okay? All right, so what am I doing here? So I am saying, grab that matcher out of the stream, right? And then for each matcher in the stream, let's create a new formatted string with this format, PT, and then this %s is going to get replaced by whatever comes out of this m.group1. Now this m.group1 is going to be the first capture group in our regular expression, okay? And so that's going to grab the minutes, okay? That's what that is. And then followed by an M, and then another substitution here, which will be the seconds from our regular expression or our capture group, okay? And so the result will be a finalized string that looks something like PT, number M, number S, something like that, okay? And then we close all of that off. Let me make sure I got my parentheses right, and it looks like I did, okay? So that's what we would get out of that. All right, and so now let's say that we want to make sure that we're on the right path here before we complete this whole entire thing, okay? So at this point, one thing I could do is to temporarily just do a for each, again, system.out print line, like so. And so then the for each method of the streams API is what is known as a terminal operation, which means that it's always at the end of a pipeline. And as such, I would need to put a semicolon here, okay? And then I could close this off and then run this. And so hopefully I get what we just see here, right? These are all of our formatted strings, and these look correct to me, okay? So that just lets me know that I'm on the right path. So I can hit the up arrow to recall this last block of code, and then I can continue forward now, all right? So in real life, I don't want that for each because we're not quite done yet. All right, so now I want to convert these formatted strings into durations, okay? And now that should be really, really easy to do. So I'm going from formatted string to duration, so another map. And now I can use the method reference format again. So duration, : parse, just like so. And so the streams API is going to take each of these formatted strings and pass them into the parse method of the duration class automatically, all right? And so then what's going to come out of here is going to be fresh instances of actual duration objects, okay? Oh, now one more thing. If I want to add any more lines into this code block, I actually need to delete that closing curly brace. Otherwise, if I had hit enter, the JShell would have executed that entire code block again. But without that closing curly brace, I can keep hitting enter and adding more lines, okay? All right, so now I will have duration objects. And so I think I've really just got one more major piece of this. So now we're going to have all these duration objects, and we just need to add them all up. And so now we get to a really, really popular and common pattern in functional programming, which is the map reduce pattern, okay? And that's basically where you take a whole bunch of things and you reduce them down to one thing. And so in our case, what we want to do is we want to take a whole bunch of duration objects and have them all added up together into one final duration object, which will represent the sum total amount of time, or the total elapsed time, okay? And so when you want to do that kind of pattern where you're taking a bunch of things and you're reducing them down into one master version of that thing, like a sum or whatever, you can do that with the reduce method of the streams API, okay? So I will call reduce. And I'm going to keep this pretty simple. And so one of the variations of the reduce method can just take two instances of whatever's coming into it from above, right? And so in this case, what's coming into this reduce method is going to be duration objects, okay? And so the way this reduce method is basically going to work is it's going to basically grab a couple of instances of durations, okay? And then it will let me do whatever I want to with any of those two duration objects or instances, okay? And those are going to be the inputs into this. So I can actually set that up with a couple more parentheses, and I'm going to call those objects A and B, like so, okay? Now here I'm going to set up a Lambda, and so just know that A and B are both instances of the duration class, okay? And so now I can call methods on the duration class, and there is a method called plus, like so. And so what's going to happen now is that the reduce method is going to take pairs of durations and call this plus method, and this plus method is going to result in the creation of a new duration object, and then the reduce method is going to take that new duration object and hold on to it essentially, and then it's going to grab the next duration object out of this list and plug that back into this function again, okay? So one of these variables is going to hold on to the next instance of duration out of this list, and then the other variable is going to refer to the newly created duration that was the result of this operation here, okay? And that is the essence of how a map reduce pattern works, okay? And so then those guys are going to keep getting added up, and the end result will be the final total, the final sum total in this case, okay? Now you could do whatever pattern you want with this, but that's the gist of how that's going to work. All right, now what's coming out of here is an optional, And the whole point of optionals, for those of you who don't know, is anytime you're doing operations that might result in nothing, the Streams API supports this notion of representing nothing as an optional thing. Okay, so you could have something or you could have nothing. And what do I mean here? Well, if we didn't have times that could actually be parsed out of the lessons variable here, then all these steps would end up in a whole bunch of nothing, okay? We wouldn't want it to blow up with like null pointer exceptions and things like that. You would just end up with a bunch of nothing. And in order to represent the possibility of something or nothing, we have the optional class, which really just wraps around, in this case, a duration, okay? So if we do actually have a duration that was able to be parsed properly, then that duration object will be inside of an optional. So optional is really just a wrapper, okay? But if we didn't have anything that could be properly parsed, then we'd still get back an optional, but the optional would be empty. Okay, so that's what we're going to get out of here, okay, an optional. And then what we'll want to do with that optional is get at the core value that's inside of it, hopefully, which will be a duration, and then we can do something with that. So we're looking now at the methods that exist on the optional class, and we can decide what we might want to do with that. So I don't know, let's take a look at the if present method here. Okay, so the if present method takes what's called a consumer, and it says if there is a value present, then it will perform the given action with the value. Otherwise, it does nothing. So maybe what we could do with this is refer back to one of the print methods. So let's see here. If we did something like a system.out : print line, like so, and then semicolon, and then I think I can do a new line and close this off like so. Let's see what we get. Hey, look at that. So we get 4 hours, 47 minutes, and 38 seconds. Okay, now what if we wanted this to be formatted a little more nicely? Let's see what we could do with that. So I'm going to hit the up arrow, and let's see, I'm going to go back over here to this line, and instead of just doing a system.out print line, we could do a printf. However, now we're going to probably want to be able to refer to the duration object that's getting passed into this. And so now we don't want to use a method reference. We want to just do it the old-fashioned way. Okay, so here we're going to have a duration object like so. And in fact, let me get rid of this curly brace here, go back over here, and I think I want to put this if present on its own line now. So I'm going to go back to here and put that on its own line like so, just so that it's a little cleaner and easier to look at. Go to the end of this line now and set this up. So let's say here, so maybe we'll do something like %d minutes : %d seconds. Oh, and I forgot the hours. %d hours, like that. And then comma, and I think I want to go to another line again. Let's see, and so d dot to. Now I just hit the tab key so that I could see the auto completion for the d.to, and notice how messy the output of this is now. And that's another thing that I'm not a big fan of when doing this kind of work in the JShell, is that it's just not really meant for us to do a whole lot of really well structured code, unfortunately. So in some ways I feel like we might be taking it to about the limits of what you may want to really do with the JShell. But like I said, this is kind of an experiment just to see, right? So I do see some of the output though of what happened when I hit tab, and it's kind of up here. It's hard to see though, because it's kind of mixed in with other things that were here. In fact, let me see what happens if I do a Control L. Okay, and then a tab. So Control L just kind of clears the screen and then redraws everything. And then if I do a tab again, yeah, you still get a big mess here. Okay, so yeah, I'm not a big fan of that. That's kind of a mess. Anyway, I think I kind of know what I want though. So I think I want the 2 hours part, comma, d.2 minutes part, comma, d.2 seconds part. Like so. All right. And then I think I can close that off again. And let's see, yeah, I got it. Okay, so 4 hours, 47 minutes, and 38 seconds. Okay. Now, I know that this feels like it's totally not worth the effort that I just put in, but that's actually mostly because I took a lot of time to explain what I was doing. So let me show you what it would look like if I were to just do this without actually explaining anything. Okay, so I'm actually going to exit out of here. And then I'm going to go back in again fresh. And let me clear the screen. And so I'm going to just shut up and just rewrite that all in one go, okay? Just so you can see. All right, so there you go. I don't know how long that took me. I'll probably put an elapsed time or something in there, but you can see that I got through that a lot quicker this time. And actually, as I was coding that up, because now I was, not having to talk to you, I was more focused on here, I realized I think I could minimize this just a little bit more right here on this reduce step. I think I could probably do, let's see if I can do this. Let's try that. Look at that. That works too. So look at that. What I was able to do here is use another method reference for the plus method. So the reason this works is because the reduce method knows how to call the plus method here. It sees that the plus method takes 2 instances of a duration. And so the reduce knows, oh, okay, I know how to handle a method that takes 2 of something. So it's just going to take 2 of the duration objects or instances, plug them into the plus method, call that plus method, take the result out, and then grab another one from the list, add these 2 together, get the result of that, take that result, grab another one from the list, plug them in together, call plus, get the result of that, take another one from the list. You see the pattern here, get that result, that one here, plug them in together to call plus, and keep going until it's done. Okay, so that's the reason that works that way. All right, so yeah, would I do this in real life for other similar one-off type things? I might. There's a fair chance that I might. It just depends on what I need to do, right? So let me just recap a couple of bits here. So the things that I didn't like about this are the fact that I have to use the curly braces. It's not that big of a deal, but I have to use the curly braces if I want to make this more readable by breaking it up into separate lines. And I think you should break it up into separate lines. Otherwise, it's just going to look like a mess, okay? If it doesn't already look like a mess to you, even as broken out lines, in fact, okay? So that's one thing I'm not super crazy about, is just the limited editing capabilities that I have within the JShell itself. But overall, I mean, that wasn't too bad. And then the fact that if I forget some detail of how to use these methods, yes, I can hit the tab key, but the resulting information that is spit out on the screen is not formatted nicely at all. And I really don't like that. So if you were going to write anything this long, you probably kind of need to know what you're doing, okay? You probably already need to have a decent idea. Now, alternatively, one thing I could have done though is to hit Control C to break out of the middle of writing that code. And then I could go kind of off to the side and go see like, okay, how does the duration method work, right? Like what are the methods on it or whatever, right? So I could have said parse like this and then dot, and then I can see all the methods that are here. And then I can see, okay, what do I have to work with here? Is there a a plus or an add or whatever, right? And there's the plus method there, right? So you could do that, or you could open up another tab even and, and do that kind of research over here on another tab, right? So I could come back over here where I'm writing my code. Whoops, let me do a Control C again, right? So I'm in the middle of my code and I'm not sure like what methods do I have now at this point, right? So then I can maybe jump over to another tab and see, okay, if I have a stream, whatever, right? But then getting back into that context, right? So like if you want to see what can you do with this reduce method at this point, that's a little harder to see over here because you're not in that flow or that pipeline. Whereas over here, you're right in it, right? So there are some trade-offs there that I'm not super crazy about. Whereas if I were in a full-fledged IDE like IntelliJ, I could have written this exact same code and at every step I could, get auto completion and help and all kinds of things, right? But in IntelliJ, I'd have to start up IntelliJ and then create a project. And that's a lot to do just to do this one-off thing, which by the way, I mean, this is throwaway code. I'm not going to use this code ever again. So there are some of the trade-offs there. But yeah, I mean, overall, I think this was still kind of a fun little project to do just to find out, okay, how long is this dude's course? That's really what I want to know, right? So yeah, that's about it. That's what I wanted to show you in this video. It went a little longer than I was expecting, as it always does, because I'm long-winded, and I wanted to kind of take you through the steps and everything. And then let me go ahead and mention again, as I always do now, you saw me use the Streams API and regular expressions and what else? And the a little tiny bit of the date time API from Java and method references, which again is kind of related to the Streams API stuff, right? So you saw me use, and the JShell itself, a bunch of techniques all combined together to do a relatively quick and dirty, utility kind of a scripty type thing for something that I just wanted to find out really quickly. How long is this guy's course? So I use a lot of techniques here. So if any of these techniques are things that you were not aware of or didn't know how to use and you want to go deeper, because obviously I didn't go very deep here, right? Obviously, I'm teaching an entire Java course where I cover every single technique that you just saw me use here, other than using the JShell itself, which I've got another video right here on this channel that shows you how to use the JShell, and you just saw me use it some more, in fact, right here. But all those other techniques and stuff are fully covered very, very thoroughly in my Java course, okay? And so look at the power of what you can do. Now, you could do these things with other languages as well, right? But I happen to be just showing you how to do these things in Java so far, okay? Eventually, someday down the road, I'll probably show you the same kinds of things in a number of other languages as well, okay? So yeah, I mean, if you want to learn more about how I did all this stuff, definitely check out my Java course, and I'll have the link in the description below. And check out the Unix course as well, because I'm in a Unix environment, which is the natural native environment that a lot of these tools really prefer to be in, if I can be really honest, okay? Nothing against the Windows users. You guys are good. I used Windows quite a bit back in the day myself, but even the Windows guys are starting to install WSL and other tools like that so that they can have a more native Linux/Unix experience, right? So yeah, that's how you can learn how to do more of this stuff. So check all of that out in the description below. And with that, I'm going to sign off, and I'll see you guys in the next one.